All right, hello, and thank you for logging on to the library's third Montana Conversations of the summer, Montana Towns, Then, Now, and Always. This event is sponsored by the Belgrade Community Library Foundation and presented with Humanities Montana. Funding for the Montana Conversations program is provided by Humanities Montana through grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, Montana's Cultural Trust, and private donations. My name is Sarah Creech, and I am the Adult Services Librarian for the Belgrade Library. We are proud to bring this program to the Belgrade community and the Montana community. I know that not everyone logging on today lives in Belgrade. In general, just because Montana's history is quite expansive, we agree with Humanities Montana's stance that we are in the homelands of Indigenous people and we want to offer our respect for their history and culture. Understanding where we have come from will help us learn and grow, making way for future generations' successes. One of the attendees at the Humanities Montana Town Hall today mentioned that Montana is a state with low population over a large landmass, and this statement rings true for me. And hopefully this talk will help us glimpse some of the struggles that come along with that. Now, a little about our presenter. Hal Stearns is an educator for 34 years and an instructor for the University of Montana's Lifelong Learning Institute and Humanities Montana. He has a particularly fond interest in sharing his passion for Montana and the West and education with community members, students, teachers, and administrators. He has led tours coast to coast and lectured in over 40 states, Germany, England, Japan, Korea, and Brazil. His undergraduate degree is from the University of Notre Dame, and his advanced degrees are from the University of Montana. His military schools include OCS, Command and General Staff, and the Army War College. If you are interested in signing up for the Humanities Montana monthly email, their DIY Humanities weekly email, or the library's monthly newsletter, please let me know. I'm happy to sign you up for that. And I am going to drop a link in the chat box right now, and will again at the end for the post-attendee survey. Take a minute at the end of the event to submit your thoughts so Humanities Montana and the library can continue the excellent programming that we both strive to provide. I will keep an eye on the chat box during Hal's initial presentation, keeping note of any questions that come up during that time. Please make sure you are muted and that your webcam is turned off for this first part, just so that the recording of the presentation portion is clear. And then when Hal opens it up to questions, we'll start with the ones that come up throughout the program. But my understanding is that he's open to them throughout. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. And then when he does open it up, we'll go with the ones that came through chat, and then from there we'll keep going. So I'm gonna make sure that everybody's muted, and they are. And I'm gonna turn off videos that I see, and then we will get started. So take it away, Hal.
Okay, well, first of all, I am delighted to be here with everybody. I am in love with Montana towns. I'm flat out, I'm just like John Steinbeck, I'm just flat out in love with Montana. So what I'd like to do is to take you all on a little trip, if we can get things going here. Toponymy, now that's one of my very favorite ones. That's the study of place names. I'm always looking about place names, so I carry with me all the time a book that I call, that is named Montana Place Names from Alzada to Zortman, a Montana Historical Society guide. And I use it everywhere as I travel along Montana because I'm just fascinated with names. Now, the corners of Montana. My dad, later in life, he was quite proud of his son with his doctorate that I finally, since I taught Montana in the West, you finally have seen all the corners of Montana. Yes, Dad. From Yaak, the northwest, Alzada to the southeast, Westby way up in the northeast corner, Monida way down south of Dillon. But some say Darby now because Monida doesn't have anybody living there anymore. So at any rate, now you know the corners. Our smallest incorporated town, wanted to change the name to Joe because of the great football player Joe Montana. It never happened, but the town is May, one of my favorite little places. The last county created in the license plate. Now, if we have 56 counties, you'd think license plate 56 would probably go the last one created. It was Petroleum County. The number is 55. Well, Silver Bow is one, and I promise you, Butte is never going to get rid of number one. Well, our two most popular high school mascot names, kind of an interesting one, Bulldogs and the Panthers, and we got plenty of both of them, I'll tell you. The town designed around a central block with the streets forming a radiant pattern from its corners, like a mini Washington, D.C. It's just outside of Great Falls, the town of Sims. It is an astounding little place to drive around. The smallest state park that we have is just outside of Boulder, Elkhorn. Number of miles from northwest to southeast. Now guess about that one, northwest to southeast. And you can just imagine how big this is going to be if we took a look at all of America. It's 884 miles. That's all of New England, half of Pennsylvania, and New York, and that's where we are in terms of distance. Broadus, the county seat of what county? This one's a real toughy one. It's Powder River, number 9. I love that one. Powder River. County seat of Webo. That's another toughie. A lot of people have trouble with this one. It's Webo, number 52. Now, Robbers Roost, very frequently visited by people, kind of stands out there by itself anymore, down in the Sheridan Twin Bridges country of the world, Virginia City and that area of the world, a little place called Alder. And why is St. Marie famous and in the news? Well, there's a good reason for that one. Glasgow Air Force Base, the last Air Force base ever created in the United States military. And it was very short-lived. The town made famous because of the pig races. You haven't been to Bear Creek, you got to do it sometime. The free enterprise radon mine just outside of Boulder, and boy, some people swear by it, that it makes them feel a ton better, in Boulder, Montana. So let's take a look now at just some of the ideas of where populations are in Montana. Those circles represent the major population areas, and in the greenish, that part shows the areas they basically serve in one way or another. Now, if you take a look at full and part-time employment, you can see it by colors. So wood product over there in the purple, for example, work your way across to the green, for example, you see where it says above it, services, manufacturing way over there on the left-hand side, healthcare, trade. These are all the types of jobs that we have in Montana. This gives you a good clue of what we do for a living in Montana. And you can see it's a real interesting hodgepodge. Now, if we take a look at jobs by county, you can see that the number of jobs that are in Billings, for example, the Bozeman area, and that includes Belgrade, Butte, Silver Bow, the Missoula, Bitterroot Valley, the Kalispell area, the Helena, Great Falls area, that the bulk of jobs, those big circles, those tend to be the urban areas of Montana. And then employment change by region, and you can see that really what we have tended to see is more healthcare jobs in most regions, and we have the number of jobs that in some ways are uncategorized because they could be services, they could be in construction. They go back and forth depending on how much mining we have going on, how much lumbering we have going on. But you can take a look at all of this can be documented where we get a sense of how people make a living in Montana and how they have done it over a period of time. So we can also do it in terms of the amount of money that people tend to make. We can see where the growth is, but also who pays the best. So for example, healthcare, average pay about $50,000 today. Average earnings in Montana, though, is about $36,000. So it can vary from one state to another very easily, or one area of Montana to the other. Now, the Montana wage gap compared to jobs across the United States, also you can get a clue for us. And you can see that we tend to be below the national standard in terms of the salaries that are made or the pay the people earn from one way or another if they're working out on their own. Now we can also do it then by earnings and dividends and transfer payments like Social Security payment. Somebody's retired, what do they get out of it? You can get a sense of how people make a living as well that way. Now, if we take a look at Montana, just as a state then, you can see we have mountain Montana, then we have plains Montana, or as some will argue, what we really have is 3 areas of Montana. We have mountain Montana, then in the east we have plains Montana, and then in the middle we have mountains and plains, or the isolated mountains. Montana is a huge state and we know it. Now here's another way, and that is if we just take a look at Montana in terms of all of the major roads that we have and put towns along those roads, that gives you kind of an idea of Montana. And you can see the number of areas of Montana that are wide open, particularly the great wide open area south of Wolf Point, for example. Now everybody has their own towns. I was born in Havre, raised in Harleton, married a girl from Glendive. My wife was the head of the college in Dillon. We lived in Helena when she was the Commissioner of Higher Education. Grandparents from Whitehall, the Deer Lodge Valley between Anaconda and Deer Lodge of Missoula, we claim as home today. Now, I was visiting with some friends down in the South a couple years ago. We went into this restaurant. They loved to tease me being a Montana boy. And this lady came over and she saw him coming. There was a big wink, I think. And she said, "Really, are you from Davy Crockett territory? Way up there in the north?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am. Thank you very much." Kind of proud of that. Now, here's a New Yorker's idea of the United States, and you can see it's all New England, period. And out here in Montana, the capital of Montana is Wyoming, or the capital of Minnesota. Well, there's no capital. Then you have California, and then you have San Francisco, and then finally you have Hollywood, uninhabited areas. Or a Bostonian's idea, there's the Western Prairies, and then it's all New England. That's basically a view that some people might have of what we're all about too. And of course, a lot of people, I tease them when I take them out on tours, that we still have jackalopes out there and fur fish. How the heck do you think a fish makes it in the wintertime? You know, it's not easy. Now, another way to look at it is we just get a Montana highway map and take a look at communities and highways and try to figure out where the highways go in Montana. So for across the northern tier of Montana, you have Highway 2. You can see where the interstate highway is coming up from Salt Lake City, heading up toward Helena, Great Falls, or coming up from Wyoming into Billings, or coming across from North Dakota down along the Yellowstone River and following. Now here's another way to look at things. That is just throw a bunch of Montana towns out there, and you can see that, oh my goodness, Belgrade is swallowed up by Bozeman, even in Townsend and Three Forks. All right. Well, my hometown, Harleton, at least made it. Now, here's another way we can take a look at things, and that is just take a look at communities. I want to focus on Glasgow for just a minute because it's kind of an interesting town. This is what Glasgow International Airport, that's what they like to call themselves. And this is what the town looks like if we draw it out. Here's what it looks like from the air. And the Washington Post said that it was in the middle of nowhere, the town furthest in the United States from anywhere, 4.5 hours to any community of over 75,000 people. Scobie was second, Wolf Point was third. So Montana got some dubious honor. But what did the community of Glasgow do? We're going to live with it. So here's another view of it from the air. And they have these beautiful, beautiful t-shirts that they sell. We call "I love Montana, I love Glasgow, Montana." And here's what the nice motel in town is, the old days of a depot in Glasgow. And they've got a lot of art on the buildings in Glasgow. And of course, they have a lot of grain products that are shipped out of that area of the world. The beautiful old hotel, wonderful supper club in town, and the high school, the Glasgow Scotties. Beautiful little Catholic church here that's been there forever and ever and ever. The neat little cinema. And they say, doggone it, we live in the middle of nowhere and we're proud of it. And that t-shirt has really sold. Glasgow Air Force Base, 25 miles north of there. The last of the Air Force bases created. And I pointed this out to you that this, from the air, look at it. It looks like a major metropolis, doesn't it? But let's get down and look at it. Welcome to St. Marie, home of the adventurous. That's what the bulk of it looks like today. But neat place to go and visit. Now, you can visit some of these interesting places in Montana, and I always think that's kind of fun. So here's a good old map of Montana, superimposed on all kinds of other things. And I take a look at Missoula where I live, and we've got slant streets. Nobody ever talks about it very much, but mostly this is a town that is laid out in squares. But the slant streets, because of a couple of ranchers who lived it, and they wanted to visit with each other occasionally, and that's why all the community got going in the first place. And then just outside of Missoula, you have Milltown, which at one time was an absolute wreck. It was one of the major cleanup sites of the United States. And this community wanted to see something done. So all the sediment coming from the Clark Fork of the Columbia, from Butte and Anaconda, all of that, and then the stockpiled mess that was there, they worked hard at getting this done. And this is what it looks like today. A beautiful state park, and it's just on the edge of a community, and a lot of people within minutes go out to take a look at it. Now, this is the best I have in terms of the actual census. And please fill out your census, and please be sure to encourage all of your neighbors. But the best projection, if we're lucky, would be 1,100,000. If we had that, our chances of getting 2 members of the House of Representatives, it could actually happen. Now, if we take a look at population by square mile, you can see Billings and Bozeman, the Helen area, the Great Falls area, the Missoula area, and the Kalispell area. That's it, nothing else in terms of population of any size at all. Now, here's another way to look at it. If you take a look at the frontier counties of the United States, you can see that basically Montana is a frontier county, more so than any other state in the United States. Now, here's another way. If we would have the 1.1 million, if everybody filled out our census, we would still have the 44th population in the United States out of all of the states of the Union. Now, we can look at it again. Here are all the towns in Montana now, and you can see them by population. Again, I've told you the major population centers that are there. And then we could take a look at it another way, and that is, where are the power centers for politics and population? So you're going to have more members of the state legislature coming from Yellowstone County, Gallatin County, Lewis and Clark, Missoula, and the Flathead, followed by Silver Bow and by the area up around Great Falls, Cascade County, than anywhere else. That means the best representation. Now, if you live up in northeastern Montana, your representation isn't going to be too hot, I could tell you. Now, here are the bigger towns in Montana again. And you can see if we have mountain ranges on there, we have Glacier on there, Yellowstone on there. Some say those are the 2 great anchors of Montana. Why do people want to come out and see us? You can see the Milk and the Missouri, the Flathead, the Clark Fork, and you see the true Missouri River working up in the Yellowstone. So these are our major bodies of water. Now, some say that if you take a look at Montana, we have 9/10 of the population within that cowboy boot. That's the population base of Montana. So we could take a look at Indian reservations, and you can see the one little one there, Chippewa Cree, the landless, headquartered now in Great Falls, finally recognized after all these years. But of course, this at one time was all Indian country. So here are the Montana anchors. Some will argue it's really Yellowstone and Glacier. People come to Montana. Why are you coming here? Well, I'm coming here because I've got to go see the last of the glaciers for myself. Oh my goodness, Yellowstone. Everybody has to get to Yellowstone. You got to go and see Old Faithful and spend a couple of days looking around. So there's Yellowstone. You can't beat it. We all know it. There's Glacier. Whew, we love that. And now we can take a look at another way. Let's go up and take a look at Westby, which is way up in the northeast corner of Montana. And right on the edge of the town, you leave Montana. Turn around, look at the other sign that says entering Montana. Right up there, you can see the sign that says entering North Dakota. So here's Alzada, which is the southeast corner of Montana. And basically all you have down there is a good old cowboy bar and a little rodeo arena. Now you can take a look at here it is. There's that bar you got to stop at. Here's Monida. Nobody's living there now. And you can see this was the old schoolhouse one time. Oh boy, I love to look at these old buildings. Darby, which now says it's the southwest west corner of Montana. And that's kind of reinventing itself as being kind of a community that really emphasizes the Old West. And there's some beautiful homes down in that area of the world. And then Yak, way up in the northwest corner. If you ever get to Yak, boy, it's beautiful country, but you work hard, then you have to go into the Dirty Shame Saloon. If you haven't been there, you haven't been to Yak. I'll tell you. So how did I become interested in rural America, rural Montana? It was because I was a part of an institute when my wife was the head of Wayne State College in Nebraska. I got really intrigued with the literature of rural Nebraska. And that's what really got me going on all of this. So I've done quite a bit of studying trying to figure out populations. So if you just take a look at 1/3 of our population is 7 communities, then the next 14 communities from Havre down to Dillon. Look at that, Dillon down to 4,200, 21 communities from Billings, over 100,000 down to Dillon. Now, look at this. Then we only have 7 towns over 10,000, 10 more over 5, 4 over 4, 4 more over 3, 6 over 2,000, 12 more over 1,500. Then think of incorporated communities, 134 of them, but look at how many unincorporated. And many of you have been to places like Garneal and Savage and Jackson and White Lash and Zurich and Redstone. Those are unincorporated communities, but alive. Now, larger than a village, smaller than a town. Here's what a town's all about. See if any of you identify with this. If you had a skip day, everybody went. Whole school after the graduation goes to the same party. Any house newer than 1980 is owned by rich people. Skip a class, the whole town knows you before your mom. You go snipe hunting. You like to drive the 3-block drag. You know everybody in all 4 classes. Can't help but date a friend's ex-girlfriend. You never lock the doors. 3-hour trip to the store. You got to stop to talk with everyone in town. More pickups than cars, and you never give directions by street names. We can probably identify with that. So here are small town facts, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. Aging populations, little political clout, lack of diversity, older infrastructure. So for example, I have headlines that I could show you. A bill offering incentives to address doctor shortages in small town Montana. Another one, Montana physicians working to keep the economy fit by traveling from one place to another to help out. 868 doctors in Montana. We have 9 counties with no doctors at all. None at all. So why do small towns struggle? Well, we know. It used to be you came out, you homesteaded 160 acres of land. We keep buying because you're raising cows, you're raising sheep. You are in not only the ag industry, but you are also raising alfalfa, wild hay. The railroad was a reason for people to come out. The loss of the mining, the oil, the timber. Often location makes all the difference in the world and the distance from anywhere. So we know Lewistown, we used to say it was always the center of Montana. It's actually a kitchen in a Hutterite colony just west of town. But Lewistown to Great Falls, 100. To Billings, 120. To Bozeman, 160. Forever to Missoula. And that's the way people would see it if they saw Lewistown as being the center of Montana. You travel. Now here's a Montana job growth. That's another way to look at it. And you can see the biggest job growth is in Gallatin County, Yellowstone County, Missoula, Lewis and Clark, and Flathead. Then it goes to Choteau County, and then to the Rosebud area, and that happened to be because of people being down there where we had that coal industry. And then there's Daniels County way up there. And why was that? And that was because of all of the mining activity and the Keystone Pipeline and the rest of it. Now, if you take a look at it in terms of school district, look at this. With 158 school districts, AA, 14, 20A, 42B, 107C, and is there a possibility of D? Well, some of these small ones have even been forced to join each other. We have in Montana only 14 schools with over 1,000 students, and you can see we have 54 schools with under 50 students. So what do you think is going to be a real difficult issue for many places? And that is finding teachers. Teachers are really hard to find in small towns and particularly up on the High Line. So the one-room school, 1918, there were 2,793 of them. Now this was nationwide. 200 of them are left in the United States, and Montana has more of them than any other state in the Union. The famous one-room schools. Here's what some of them look like in the olden days, what they look like now, empty, of course. That one just out, Big Timber is there, that beautiful little museum they have just on the edge of the interstate. Here are some of the abandoned schools that we have. Oh boy. When I was a kid, we used to play ball against Sumatra. Oh, the Shaman School, which only closed about 4 years ago. Well, another way to look at it, we could do a profile of one town. Let's take Superior, because I just kind of like that town, because it's halfway between Billings and Seattle and Boise. So it's kind of in a middle place. All right, here it is. It's right along the Clark Fork of the Columbia. Now, if we take a look at it, it has a community hospital, and it has got the rail track going through there. There's the Clark Fork River, and it has a beautiful park, and it's got a darn good little junior high school, and this is what the main drag looks like. And in the summer, they have a terrific auto show that they have every year. And there's the little community hospital, but their big problem is doctors. How do you keep them? Now, here's what the school plant looks like. Here we are playing ball. Now, here's my hometown of Harleton. Growing up, this was the letterhead of my parents' newspaper. Any kind of mail that they sent out, they're writing a letter somewhere. This is what it looked like. Now, on the back side of it, it showed Harleton as being the center of the universe. And I think that's the way most small towns see themselves, as being the center of their own little mini universe. So here's my little town from the air. One of my closest friends who wrote a wonderful remembrance about the town. This is the old Graves Hotel. When the railroad to Milwaukee was going 105 miles an hour, this was a great hotel. It's completely abandoned today. There's the main street. Look at it. It's a busy day. The old flour mill. All that flour going to be shipped off to the Twin Cities. That corner's where all of us kids stood around during lunch hours or after school, Friday and Saturday night. The courthouse, which at one time was the school, the Bear Memorial Clinic. Get that name, Bear, B-A-I-R. If it hadn't been for the famous Charlie Bear family, there would be no hospital in Harleton, nor Roundup, nor White Sulphur Springs. That family has given a tremendous amount to keep those hospitals going. Well, there's the present day school. Football field when I was a kid, 11-man football. 11-man football. Guess what? It went to 8-man football. Are you kidding me? 8-man football? Now it's 6-man. And Harleton wouldn't even have football if it did not have Rygate joining up from Golden Valley County. At one time or another, they wouldn't even talk to each other. Now they have to share. So look at the way we built railroads. This is the way the railroads looked in 1887. Now look by 1898. And then look by 1910. Now, how many communities came around because of railroads? A lot of them. So here are the Montana railroads in 1915. Look at this. All of those are communities along rail tracks. And the Great Northern, the Northern Pacific, the Milwaukee, the Burlington, the Utah, all of them would stop in those little communities, picking up people getting off. So now in my hometown of Harleton, you can see one of the old electric engines. It just sits there. Well, it was electrified from my hometown of Harleton all the way to Avery, Idaho. My goodness. That was 660 miles. Now we see these abandoned old section houses today that provided the power for those electrics. And that's what the depot looked like. So that was the glory days of my hometown. I rode those dome liners a lot. I did my undergraduate at Notre Dame. I could get on the Milwaukee, 5 minutes from my house, get off in Chicago, take a cab for about 10 minutes, and get on another train for 2 hours, and I would be in South Bend, Indiana. And the Great Northern and the Northern Pacific had wonderful, wonderful superdomes just like the Milwaukee. Well, Jim Hill's Great Northern Railway. If you go up to Havre, you can see that great monument to Jim Hill right there. You know, his idea was he was going to have a railway that was going to be built all the way up there, and was going to make use of a lot of the possible traffic that would be not only northern Montana, but also Glacier National Park. Now that Northern Pacific Railway, boy, there was one that carried an awful lot of folks. Carried a lot of coal, carried a lot of wood, different directions. So now, you know, of course, the Burlington Northern, the BNSF, and take a look at the trackage that's in Montana today. And only on that northern line do you see that infrequent traffic that is taken where you could have passenger service. Periodically, somebody will say, you know, we need to bring the train back. Why in the heck aren't we like China, Japan, all over Europe, where you have great train service? But we don't. We have a love affair with the automobile. So, my goodness, what would it be like if we had that kind of train traffic today? This might be an idea what it could be like. Yeah. If people would get on the train. Now, here's another way to look at things. We could have some interesting train traffic this way. Yeah. Now, coal trains and Amtrak, Montana, we see a lot of those coal trains. Livingston, there's a place that has been able to survive pretty well because that's where they do a lot of the maintenance work. And they have done a beautiful job with that great little museum, that railway museum right in downtown Livingston, boy. Well, hi, Frank, how's life in the past lane? Well, that's me. I spend a lot of my time in the past lane, but that's what historians often do. So history is kind of an ongoing puzzle. So what should we visit? All right, we want to pay attention to Montana. The Little Bighorn, the Nez Perce Trail, the early mining camps, the caverns, the state parks, the museums, the homesteads, the ranches, the big towns, the little towns. And of course, everybody's familiar with Sitting Bull Tatonka and George Armstrong Custer. And this was the most famous piece of artwork there was in America in the 1880s, 1890s. Now we go down to the battlefield today. Here's the famous Nez Perce War, Joseph and the Nez Perce, an unbelievable story. And of course, our ghost towns. Now let's take a look at a few of those kinds of ghost towns. A famous one, Two Dot. Oh, there's the Two Dot Bar. Out on the highway there on Highway 12, it says Two Dot Bar. Easy to find, hard to leave. Now, here's the old mining camp of Garnet. Just about 45, 50 minutes outside of Missoula. And it's been well restored because of a lot of people who have joined a society who said, we want this mining camp to be around. Get a lot of visitation in the summer too. Now here's Bannock, Bannock State Park. We're familiar with that today, part of the state parks of Montana. And here's Ortman Landusky, which we've just let go ahead and fall apart. But boy, there's a great story up in that area. And here's the Parrot Smelter down south and west of present-day Dillon, another one that would have a great story to it. And of course, Butte, beautiful Butte, there it is. And it's got a great museum there, and it's people pay $2, $2.50 to go out, and so they can take a look at the largest Superfund site in the United States. There it is, beautiful Butte, America, the pit. Now, let's take a look at some of the issues that often impact Montana towns then, now, tomorrow. And that is, if we did have a Keystone Pipeline, you can see that it would impact Montana because it would go right across that northeastern corner of Montana, which would mean jobs. So that's one way. But to go down and take a look at the area where you would be in Nebraska. In Nebraska, western Nebraska has the great underground water system called the Ogallala. Now, if there was a leak of a keystone, the Ogallala would be dead. If the Ogallala is dead, that means all of ranching in western Nebraska is done. So, see it? Here's another way to look at it. Now, this kind of damage could be in a lot of different places, but on the other hand, it provides a lot of different kinds of jobs. So, so now let's take a look at another area. And that is if we take a look at what we have in terms of that mining in the Great Williston Basin. Now here's the Bakken, there's the Williston, and you can see the impact of places like Glasgow, Sydney, Glendive, Miles City. And I've known people that live in western Montana that have worked over there in that Bakken that come home every other weekend for 3 days. They work straight through for 12 days and get a couple of days off. And here's some of the possible reserve areas that'd be out there in terms of areas that you might be able to see possibility of getting minerals. Now here's the Bakken and the man camps. And we know if you've been to Williston in a long time, you know things have slipped considerably. Here was the little town of Bainville that was really going to make it, they thought. Slipped away though. The Golden Sunlight Mine just outside of Whitehall, owned by a company out of Australia. Now, the price of gold is up. They work. Price is down. No work. Right now, things have calmed down in terms of very, very little mining activity. Also, now you have to restore everything. Now, here's down at Nye, near the Columbus area. Palladium, the only site that we have anywhere for this, and a product that is much needed. And here's Coldstrip. Now, you all are aware of the fact that 2 of those big old smelters you see over there are all done. Coldstrip, in an earlier day and age, though, everybody believed this is go on forever, and this is going to be an unbelievable cleanup. But if you go and take a look at the little town of Coldstrip, the town is really well laid out. Beautiful school plant. Oh my goodness. But jobs aren't like they used to be. Now, here's the new energy world. There's the Judith Gap wind farm. Wind farms are coming in big time in a lot of different places. And what about solar energy? We see this in many places, and it's going to continue to grow. So I'm going to go back now and do a case study with you. Here's White Sulphur Springs. Now there's the castle built by a guy who was only going to get his Scottish girlfriend, and that's where he migrated from, to come to the New World if she could have a Scottish castle all of her own, and he built it for her. And down there in the bottom, you see the old railway days from the Ringling Brothers Circus, and there's the main street of the community of White Sulphur Springs. So the museum is up there in that old castle today. That's a beautiful place to go and visit sometime. And there you can go and see one of the famous old mills from the days when we used to do an awfully lot of that timber work right there on the spot. Just 2 miles out of town, you can go and see this beautiful old plant. And here's the wonderful hot springs going way back to Indian days. Natural hot water, and it's a beautiful little place to stay now. It's all fed by that hot water, cleared out every night at 11 o'clock, and new fresh water the next day at 6 a.m. And they've got a neat little brewery in town. Now, why are things looking pretty good here? Because of Red Ant's Pants, this great little women's wear business, and they have brought in unbelievable talent to little old White Sulphur Springs, Montana. And it's put the little town on the map. Now, Music Festival, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, we've all heard of them. I mean, these are big time outfits that come in there. Now, here's the next issue though, the Smith River. Now, if you've never done a float to the Smith River, then you gotta get put in for it because there's only a certain number that are allowed on the river each day. That's it. So it's a lottery system. a blue ribbon trout fishery. You get on the river and if you see anybody else on the river, because it's spaced in such a way that you feel like you own the river to yourself. Oh, the country you go through is absolutely gorgeous. But now the hot potato. An outfit called Tintina Resources, Black Butte Copper, a copper project, and you've seen the advertising in a lot of different places. This is the hot potato. Would it be responsible development taking waterways to develop this copper? And they have found good copper deposit. But what would happen if some of the water polluted gets down into the Smith River, which is 140 miles of absolute treasure, one of the great treasures that we have anywhere? So take a look at it. There's Great Falls, Helena, Townsend, Bozeman, Livingston, White Sulphur, Black Butte. And you take a look at where the mining would be. Marr County, Montana. Wow. A lot of jobs. Now here's another case study. Okay, now look at this. This doesn't look like much at all, does it? Well, Fort Shaw. Now Fort Shaw, this is an intriguing place because at Fort Shaw, this is where some of the earliest military training was done. Here's the old Fort Shaw walls. Nothing has happened with Fort Shaw. Nobody's ever paid much attention to it. But when you go over and take a drive around there a little bit, has it got some great history, including the Government Industrial Indian School. And here was a very special place because the great story of the 1904 Fort Shaw Indian girls, the first world champions came out of Fort Shaw, Montana. Indian girls taught to play basketball by the superintendent of the Indian school, and they went to St. Louis and won it all. Never done much of a job at telling this story, though. And here they are. Those were the Indian girls that won it all. Now here's another one. Fort Assiniboine, 8 miles outside of Havre. Now, we let this one just kind of go. Very, very little historic documentation out here. But at one time, this was a major, major training area for the military. And a guy by the name of Black Jack Pershing was located at Fort Assiniboine. Where did he get the name? World War I fame? Because the first unit he commanded after he got out of West Point was at Fort Assiniboine, an all-black African-American unit. Now, let's go into Havre, just 9 miles away. And Havre, beneath the streets, is amazing. And you can see a buffalo jump that is right on the edge of their shopping center. Now look at that neat little sign there in the middle. And it looks like Havre's just booming, doesn't it? But here's a problem. Here's the mall. Remember when we had a Herberger's? All done. Then, same way for a big K, a mile away. Kmart is not around anymore. Now, Kmart got eaten up by Walmart, which was right next door. Now, here's the Montana Cattle Kingdom. Here's another way to look at it. This brought an awfully lot of people out here to the west. Cattle brands all over the place. And here's Main Drag. Sometimes you get a story told in a very special way. The little town of Terry, look at this cool little place. Because of a woman by the name of Evelyn Cameron, who came from money. She and her husband came from the British Isles. They were going to raise racehorses, and she ended up being out there on the ranch, the only woman. What's she going to do with her time? And she took up photography, and one of the most wonderful photographers we have ever had, and she captured the American West like very few others. Unreal to see the photography of this astounding Evelyn Cameron. Look at this, a working cattle ranch, and only the owner and his wife there at the right-hand side. Had to be pretty lonely for her, I'll tell you. But boy, she captured it. Well, there's Charlie Russell's last of the 5,000 waiting for a Chinook. So here's the homestead era. That brought a lot of people out and a lot of little towns. Go to the land of opportunity. Let's head to Montana. Raised in Chicago without so much as a backyard to play in. When I heard you could get 320 acres just by living on it, I felt I'd been offered a kingdom. We're going to build a community, schools, good roads, good homes. We knew we had a great country. But this is what homesteading really was. That little shack down on the bottom, the one-room school. How far away from a doctor, a midwife? And yet we created counties like crazy. A guy by the name of Daniel McKay, who was responsible for the creation of 18 Montana counties. He owned a brickyard, rode a white horse, and he advocated for county creation. Who do you think's going to build the courthouses, though? Daniel McKay. Well, look at there. Boys of my gang were torn between a desire to own a Stanley steamer and the wish to continue living. Yep, a car for the mountains. And then everybody was ever involved as a county commissioner, the roads, always the roads. Good roads will decrease profanity, discouragement, back taxes, sheriff sales, sour grapes, and crouches. And then the wind. And then the drought. A hard, hard land. 20 miles from water, 40 from wood. We're leaving dry Montana. We're leaving her for good. Yet every one of us loves to get lost in Montana. We love our small towns. Think of Lewistown, Main Drag, Lewistown. Reed Point. How many people would go and watch all those sheep go running down a main drag? Missoula with the first hand-carved carousel since the 1930s. The Big Hole, and watching a beaver slide in action as you put up the hay, the 10,000 haystacks. Fort Benton, that wonderful little community, the end of the steamboat coming up from St. Louis. Story galore. And that hotel, oh, the story of the ever-faithful companionship, the dog who waited for his master to return. A fellow passed away and body shipped back to Iowa, where he was from. And the buffalo hunters. And of course, the buffalo nickel. That's a Fort Benton story, because guess what? At the Montana Ag Museum there, that is the bison, the Hornaday bison. That's the one for the nickel, a Montana animal. And then, of course, look at our magnificent white cliffs of the Missouri. The tragedy, I hate to show this one because you see that little partial circle there? Some yahoos up there, beer cans were found when they ripped the top off of that. Oh, but we have the white cliffs. 147 miles of some of the most beautiful area of the world. On a trip that I had with people one time, lady on the trip, I never forgot this. I'd been telling stories and everybody's ready to go to sleep at night. Everybody's looking up at the heavens. And this lady said, "This is the first time I have ever heard the silence." Well, we've got that in Montana. Pompey's Pillar, where Clark signed his name. Whitehall, a neat little town with its great little museum. But more so, the murals that it has all over town telling the story of the Lewis and Clark expedition passing through that area. Beautiful work. Or the Lincoln Grizz, right up the road to Lincoln, Montana. How many people have to stop and see this Grizz that was killed when a guy driving to work from Lincoln down to Missoula had a big pickup and he hit that guy. Largest of all of the Grizz. The Wood Sculpture Garden right outside of Lincoln. The beautiful military museum in Helena, Montana. The Dogs of War at Camp Rimini. Charlo and the Flathead Reservation. The Marine Memorial. The Charlo family. One of those 5 was a kid who came from Charlo, Montana to put up that famous flag at Iwo Jima. His name was Louis Charlo, the town of Charlo. Well, the changing face of Montana, the prairie cathedrals in the old days when we used to have those old ways of storing our grain. There they are. That's the Prairie Cathedral. Now look at them. Huge. There's one of them, blocking off a good view of Pompey's Pillar, by the way. So here's somewhere Montana, and there's anywhere Montana. There's Darby's new old town and Medicine Lake, the spring home of the Pelican, neat town. Twin Bridges, the great racehorse Spokane. 1889 won the Kentucky Derby out of Twin Bridges, Montana. Ekalaka, and what a fabulous dinosaur museum they have in Ekalaka. Chinook, home of the sugar beeters. Just can't even imagine how you could be a mascot looking like that. People had the big dream that they were going to make it in the sugar beet game. Whitehall has a stack like that. So does Hamilton. There's little old Alberton. 100,000 used books for sale. The Jersey Lily. Recently closed, by the way. I don't know if somebody's going to pick it up again or not. If you're going to use the bathroom, you're going to have to use the old outhouse out back, and they always had the pot of bean soup on. Troy, the lowest elevation, highest in recreation. Neat town. Now, football stadiums, and we've got some fabulous ones. Billings Gazette a couple of years ago did a piece on the great football stadiums in Montana. And the one that is the one down on the bottom right, D, you could play a college football game there and feel like you were playing in the best place going. That's the one in Glendive, Montana, built by a fella who did very well in the insurance business, grew up in Glendive, and then went off to play college football and in the pros. Kremlin and Hingham, typical little Montana towns. Flaxville, Judith Gap, little Martinsdale. Wonderful little place, the Crazy Mountain Inn. A little railway depot right there. That Charlie Bear I was telling you about, keeping those hospitals going. You could visit the Bear Mansion, that home. Oh my goodness, it is a stunning place to go visit. And there's little old Sims, Montana, the miniature Washington, D.C. There's a favorite place, Culbertson. They have any kind of an event, everybody shows. Love that little town. Plentywood, another one. Look at that long road to anywhere, somewhere, or nowhere. And you know, sometimes we feel a little bit like some of our communities are just kind of swallowed up. Well, there's a lot of things I don't know much about. I probably should that. But I do know that I have a love affair with Montana. Somebody a few years ago in the Montana legislature came up with this idea. Instead of 56 counties, let's have 18 counties. That didn't get very far, you can imagine. Never even got out of committee. But we do know this, and that is population is on the move. The opportunities for education, jobs, or happiness. Why do you live where you live? What are the places? Because you wanted to get away from something, the out of doors, the nice place just to live, family, friends, schools. What do you like most about your community? Well, the economic opportunity, bigger town, family, outdoors, natural amenities, rural character. What do you like least? Now look at these. The adverse natural conditions, the lack of economic opportunity. Growth just ain't going to happen. Seems like there's a poor social climate in the area. What's your reason for staying? The rural character, darn good schools, nice place to live, employment. And then when do you want to leave? I want to just get away. Go to somewhere else or finish school anywhere others. Economic opportunity. So some young people insist they won't leave home, rural Montana, unless, it's hell. Many young people leave rural towns, do so in part because of the slow-paced scene. Boring. So case studies. I like the Livingston. I use this one as kind of an interesting little case study. It's close to you folks. Because this is a town that in some ways really kind of invented all over, and you've all been there and you've seen it. I love to see what they've even done with kind of refreshing some of the ghost art on the side of buildings. So here's my idea toolbox for you. How do Montana towns thrive? And this is for Belgrade. Community pride, you invest in the future, you participate, community decision maker, you support your education programs, an active economic development, emphasis on the next generation of leaders, adequate health care, preserve the tradition, a sound infrastructure, information resources. Why come here to live or work? Seeking help, learning from the outside, conviction that we've got to step up and do it. So how do you engage? You join the school in a lot of ways by going to the school dance just to watch, to go to the ball game, join the chamber, the local coffee club and talk about what can we do to make our town better. Be a member of Kiwanis or Rotary. You partner up for Earth Day and food banks and community dinners. Be bold and creative. Come up with the ideas. Get people together to talk about it. Anytime that you could bring people together with the word of "and." So the English teacher and the writer, the football team and the business community, the fishing shop and the biology teacher. No silos. We got to recognize we're one community. The social contract. And the social contract is the voluntary agreement for people to work together for mutual benefit of everybody. So, little old Livingston pubs. The famous Beaver Creek Brewery in Webo has made Webo come alive. We've got these little brew pubs all over the place, and that's getting people to come in of all ages and talk to each other. It can make a difference. And we got some cool little places, I'll tell you. This one's kind of neat. This is in Deer Lodge. Ooh, what a spot. So here's another case study. Here's little old Scobie. The Daniels County Courthouse, which years ago happened to be a brothel, interestingly enough. But look at Scobie. Look at that main drag. The whole town gets out together and cleans it up a couple of times a year. And they have their own little Montana history village right on the edge of the town. And then they have a beautiful 9-hole golf course in Scobie. And here's Eureka, another place that is dolled up downtown. I'm going to be speaking in Eureka on Sunday night at an outdoor amphitheater that they have. I'm looking forward to it. It is a special, cool little place, but people work together. And there's the great Peaburg. Look at Peaburg. Boy, have they done a nice job with that little town. That's because a lot of people work together, I'll tell you. But the thing is, their school enrollment is going down. And if you don't have young families, it's tough to make places go. And then I love to go and visit courthouses. Doll them up. Here's the one in Great Falls. And there's Black Eagle and the smelter when it had the smelter. Tell your story. The Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center and Charlie Russell and the Giant Springs and Fergus County and Carter County and Rosebud and Richland. Courthouses are special. Toole and Lincoln and Teton and Ravalli. Anaconda. Deer Lodge. Done a nice job with Deer Lodge. The Grant Coors Ranch. The Yucca Theater in Hysham. My own hometown of Harleton. The only reason this town still has a theater is because it's managed by high school students. So travel Montana. Get yourself your good old Montana place names. Get out and see it. Get Montana behind the scenes and make your town happen. Yep, there's a lot of great stories out there. What a Montana story. The Love Affair, Blind Deer Ponies. Stanley Gordon West passed away just a few weeks ago. the Willow Creek Cafe and Saloon with a bicycle out in the front. I had to go and see it for myself. Little old Ringling. And then there's Arapish, a Crow leader in 1833 said, the Crow country, good country, the Great Spirit has put it in exactly the right place. That's Montana, by the way. The Big Open in northeastern Montana. We got all these wonderful places. This is in Sydney, which of course hoped they were going to make it big time because of the Bakken. Slipped away. But I think they were dreaming a little bit too much. Eyes were too open. They had to think their way through about, is this going to be a win one, lose one, or here one moment and gone the next? We have too many places like this in Montana. Too many little places that just sit there. Well, those old saloons have all got a couple of good stories to them. Yep. Two-Dud Bar, easy to find and hard to leave. Well, what about small towns? I guess that's enough of this. They often die slowly and often painfully. Small towns are too often like a person with a long wilderness. Too often, small towns, though, have another positive side. They're the center of American values, the country heart, the close-knit, the caring, the ag and the rural life coming together. You know, when you stop and think about it, every community has something special. And Belgrade's a classic illustration. You live in a neat place. But you know, when you think of what your population, I looked this all up because I was very curious. In 2010, 7,400 people. In 2020, it's expected that you're going to have almost 10,000. You're the 8th largest community in Montana, in Belgrade. Yeah. 3,150th in the United States. Population increase has been considerable between 2010 and 2020, 30%. The largest Montana town without a county seat. The unmanned railway siding, almost 10 miles west of Bozeman. And you know, you think of the Serbian investors in the Northern Pacific coming together and incorporating it. I think of that, the international airport, which of course has Bozeman's name to it, Bozeman, Yellowstone. Of course, it's adjacent to your city boundary. But it hits me that the bulk of the history, and there's some wonderful history in all that area, but the Gallatin History Museum downtown Bozeman, and then of course the Museum of the Rockies. Wow. You know, it hits me that you've got a magnificent special events center. I remember a few years ago, I wanted to go to a basketball tournament because I wanted to see Class C ball. And I went and I sat down and I just started visiting with some of the locals, and we sure had a lot of fun shooting the breeze. So state was in Missoula this year. I was there. So it hits me that with your speedway on the outskirts of town and your fall festival, you got some neat things going. And you know, you're the home of the Panthers, you know, and I love that story, that little piece of history. You know, you got to tell your history stories. I never knew this till I did a little research, and that is that famous, the Belgrade Bull, that black and white Holstein that no cowboy could ride, you know, right off the old Bozeman Trail. And then here came this guy, this Mexican rider who rode him. I guess that ended that old show. But, you know, you're a community that is a bit cheaper than, say, Bozeman. You're younger than Bozeman in terms of population. You've still got that small town atmosphere, and yet you've got the larger town advantage right next door to you. Well, I said it was going to take me 1 hour, and I was going to do it, and I just did it in 1 hour and 1 minute and 13 seconds. Now I'll shoot the breeze about anybody that wants to talk about anything. Hello.
Well, thank you, Hal.
Yeah,
That was
well, how are
awesome.
you?
Hi. Yeah, we're
Nice.
great. We have a comment that just came in. What a wonderful presentation. Certainly makes me want to explore our wonderful state. Thank you so much, and would love to have a recording of this. It will be listed on our library YouTube channel, and if you attended today's session unregistered through the Google form, I will be sending out the link. So look for that probably tomorrow afternoon. It'll take us a little while in the morning to get it uploaded, but it will be in your inbox tomorrow. And we have our 2 other Humanities Montana conversations on our website or on our YouTube channel as well. So anyone have any questions for Hal? I was thrilled that you mentioned the Belgrade Bowl. We actually just had a local campaign to have one of our local artists, our main local artist, Wendy Marquis, who actually stopped in for a bit. I saw her name pop up. She painted a mural for our Main Street, and now the Belgrade Bowl is immortalized on our the side of a building, so you can't miss it when you drive through town now. Carmen has a question. Thought about COVID's impact on Montana?
Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, it's the larger communities that kind of paid a price, and for exactly the same reasons that you've seen, we have mirrored every other big place, and that is if you go to centers like rest homes, older people, and if somebody's been a carrier that gets in there, my goodness, the impact on family can be astounding, and so that's a big one. Now, the big question mark will be, let's say the Montana State Bobcats or the University of Montana Grizzlies, just as 2 examples, that if you get people in confined spaces like that, that we could have the same type of a thing of a lot of other places where you get people in a confined area. So if we were going to have college football this fall, I have no idea about what kind of crowds we would have. So in a way, I think we're a microcosm of what is in other places. I pay attention every chance I get to take a look at what numbers do we see in Montana counties. And interestingly enough, it tends to be the counties like Flathead and Gallatin, Yellowstone, Missoula. Those are the ones where you tend to have the greater number of cases. They also tend to have more and more of folks hanging in the outdoor bar areas where they can sit around and have a cold one and shoot the breeze with each other. So I think we're just like everybody else. And I just pray that we're going to be able to get out of this thing with no more loss of human life. Oh, this is the 1918 flu epidemic all over again. And I can still remember as a kid playing golf with my dad in my little hometown. And my dad was a pretty darn good golfer, but he hooked one into the old cemetery of the town. It was right in the middle of the golf course, believe it or not. We went through the barbed wire fence, and he said, "Now, son, we're not going to pay any attention to finding that golf ball. I'll never find it. I'm just going to take a penalty. But I want you to take a look at the number of people dying in 1918. I never forgot how many of those tombstones said 1918. We better be careful or we could repeat."
Yeah. Thank you.
Who else has got one?
Caroline Bitts has said, great presentation, something for all Montanans, and has a question. Have you ever thought about including the Jefferson City Tiger Botanical Garden and Arboretum in your presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
I really should, because that is a gem. The only thing is, there are several other things that I should actually include too, because we've really got a number of fabulous places in Montana to include. I could only give a little bit, but that would be a gem of one that I would be well worth it for me to include. I'll take that one on.
And then just a few other comments. Very informative. Great job. Love Montana. Learned about some new areas to visit. And then thank you. You're a wealth of knowledge and share your knowledge in an engaging way. Just so everyone has it again, I will share the follow-up survey again in the chat. If you don't mind taking a minute, it really does help get Humanities Montana more funding from their funders, and then it helps the library learn as well. So if you have a moment to fill that out. Any other questions or comments? I have one. I liked how you started, Hal, with the different maps. I actually have a map in my bedroom, or a play on a map of Ithaca, New York, where I grew up. And it's, shows downtown Ithaca, and then in the outskirts of it, it's like these things are really close. Like Long Island is right next door, and Florida is right next door, and Boston, and then over here there's Spain and Ireland, but everything's all close together because but Ithaca's huge on the map, so I appreciated that. It was fun to see some other ones. Anybody else?
Well, I'll leave you just with John Steinbeck. I have a love affair with Montana. With other states, I have respect, even admiration, but with Montana, it's love. If Montana only had a seacoast where I could live away from the sea, I would immediately apply for admission. Of all the states, Montana is my favorite and my love.
Well,
good way to end.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. Like I said, you'll get an email with the YouTube presentation afterwards, and I'll send the survey again tomorrow afternoon. So thank you, Hal, for joining us, and we hope to see you all soon at another Humanities Montana or Belgrade Community Library event in the future.
Right. Okay. See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.